Knowledge Dual Credit Multimedia, and I am the host for today's show spotlighting the Kentucky Gateway Museum in Maysville, Kentucky. For this episode, I will be speaking with Ashley Ford, who is the creator of Kentucky Gateway's Museum current fall exhibit on the age of the ocean liner. The exhibit is from the collection of Mr. Ford and his wife Barbara. Also joining us today is Tandy Nash, the education creator at the Kentucky Gateway Museum Center.
Cody, I'd like to introduce you to Ashley Ford. He is the curator for the exhibit that we have in the Kentucky Gateway Museum Center. He and his wife, Barbara, have donated beautiful, beautiful ocean liners to our museum, and they are on display. Ashley, this is Cody Gorman. Gurman, sorry.
All right, nice to meet you guys. All right, I'm gonna get started, guys. All right.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Ford. I've seen the collection from a DVD yesterday. I thought it was pretty interesting. How did you become interested in ocean liners?
Well, it's a funny story. It goes back to being interested in trains.
Yeah.
Or transportation, well, but trains, model trains that people get excited about are used to be steam engines. So my father was a model train and ran trains, but I got interested in steam technology because that's what powered steam and railroad trains across. So I got into the history of steam engines and so on, and I collected a bunch of them, still have them. And indeed, the museum in Maysville is interested in getting my model train collection eventually because they're slowly morphing into a museum of transportation as well as a museum of miniatures. And I finally decided I had plenty of model trains, so I didn't need any more. So when we moved to an apartment, I wanted to put something to start decorating a hallway I had available, which I'm sitting in at the moment, actually. You can see some stuff on the wall. And steam ships look like the next best candidate because it's steam engines that power they replace the sails, as you heard on that DVD. And so that's how I got into model trains and model ships. There's a joke in the guitar business, which maybe you play guitar or anything like that.
Nah.
There's a joke about how many guitars do you need, and it's a formula. It's a very mathematical formula, and H is how many you have, and N is how many you need, and the formula is N equals H plus 1. You always want one more guitar. Well, once I got into ocean liners, I found that, and so I added to them. And finally, most of the really good ones have gone to Maysville. But that's how I got into model in the ocean. It's also nostalgic. I'm old enough that I traveled on one of the great ocean liners in the 1950s as a student, about your age, going for a tour with some parents of my friends of my parents who were living in England, and were taking their teenage children on a trip around France and Italy and stuff. And I was invited to go over, and at that point, I went on an ocean liner, the old New Amsterdam. So I actually traveled on one of these things in 1954 or so before they all expired. So that's how I got into it.
That's pretty cool. So I don't know if you answered this like with Miss Ream, but are you guys doing guided tours at the museum or not?
We're getting an echo here. Are you still okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
It's called Meet the Collector Days.
Yes.
Which is I think that a properly run exhibit, except possibly in paintings, that kind of fine art should speak for its history. Exhibits should speak for themselves. You should design the labels and the exhibits so that you don't need a guided tour. If you have a school group of 20 people, you got to herd the cats, so you got to do some kind of guided tour. Or it's helpful, but I let the exhibit speak for itself and hover around as a resource. I try to volunteer stuff when I'm there and I see somebody looking at something and I think of something interesting about it or something that might be, if they're already interested in one particular thing, then I can add to it. And I answer questions, but I don't lead people around by the nose.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll be there November 14 and 17. That's next Saturday and the following Tuesday. And then December 5, Saturday, I'll be back there again. If some parents of families can go to the museum on their own, wearing masks, but you can go in groups of 2, 3, 4, 5 family groups, and it's permitted to go. And I'm ready to talk to them. We keep our distance, but but I'll be there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, sir, you certainly have a love for history, and from my research, I've learned you are a historical character interpreter. What got you into portraying people of the past?
I just fell into it because I was involved in the old Cincinnati Historical Society, which is about used to be, it really doesn't exist very much anymore, but it's about the same vintage as the Maysville Mason County Historical Society, which has become the Kentucky Gateway Museum, 19th century history society. We had a history society with a library and a publication program and field trips, but no museum. And so the Cincinnati Union Terminal was in danger of being torn down for no purposes, for having not have a purpose anymore. The trains had left. So the society wanted to create a history museum to help tell the story of Cincinnati history, to take it out of the library, out to the public.
Yeah.
So I created a history museum that was a timeline starting in the founding of the city and with trees, an indoor timeline with little vignettes of locations, a pioneer cabin, the woods, flatboat gallery, a Cincinnati of 1859 with a steamboat in real water. It was a fake, real water, but a fake steamboat, all inside the building. And they staffed that with paid staff who would interpret in the woods. They'd have a surveyor. In the pioneer cabin, they'd have pioneer people weaving and making carding wool and things like that. The flatboat, they have a flatboatman sitting on the roof, and on the steamboat, they had steamboat captain and some other people down there. And the staff was doing that, but staff is thin, and we had a core of volunteers. They had some volunteers. I asked what could I do for the museum, which I was on the committee that helped put the thing together. And then I retired from Procter & Gamble and asked what could I do for them, and they said, why don't you try doing first-person interpretation? And so I just had never done it before. I'd seen it. Indianapolis, there's a wonderful museum called Conner Prairie, where if you go there, it's 1836, and you talk to people who purport to be residents of 1836. And so you are the stranger in their world is the concept. And it's very tough to do that in an internal modern building, but we did try to do that for the 25 years we did it down there. And that's how I got into it. And the steamboat captain was where I started. Sometimes that kind of work is done with named persons, famous.
Yeah.
Like you go to Williamsburg, you can meet Thomas Jefferson, for example. We were doing it there mostly with the named persons, but it was just generic. I was a steamboat captain talking about welcoming on board, hoping to sell them tickets to New Orleans, telling them about the class's service, hoping they had enough money to buy cabin class up on the second deck, where you'd have meals and wines and everything else, or you could travel on deck passage. And for $15 to New Orleans, and if you're upstairs, $3 to New Orleans if you're a deck passenger. So that's how I got into it, and I did it for some 25 years in various guises. And the Stephen Foster thing came out of that.
Yeah.
Some years later, but if you want to see that kind of thing in action, the Conner Prairie Museum in Indianapolis is pretty cool place to go.
I might have to check that out sometime. I read on an article about you that you interpreted what it's like being like Captain Wade and Stephen Foster. Can you give us a little insight about that? About them?
Well, Wade is the captain I was just referring to. They identified a real captain named Richard Wade, who actually was captain of a boat called the Queen of the West, which is what the name of the boat in the museum exhibit is.
Yeah.
They've abandoned that chronological story, by the way. They're telling the newly reopened museum is having specialized galleries when they get it finished, but the boat is still there. Wade was a real person. He had a real story, but as I got into it, I found out that people really didn't care about his real story. What they want to know is about transportation. Everybody is used to transport. You buy tickets on airplanes, on buses, not on ocean liners anymore. But having somebody there to talk about the classes of service and how much it cost to go to New Orleans and how the steam engine worked and so on was useful. So that's Wade is a captain trying to sell tickets to people who come through the museum. I don't know what they're doing down there right now. Mostly they've converted that gallery into an exhibit where you just go and read the labels. I don't think they're having anybody do that anymore. But
Yeah.
there were 5 or 6 of us who tried to fill out a week. I mean, we never did it more than 4 hours at a time, so it wasn't fully staffed in the 8 hours a day sense. But we tried to make people feel that they were people from the 1850s who might be trying to go to New Orleans, and I was trying to get them to convince them to go on my boat. Now, the Stephen Foster story, after I'm a piano player, sort of, since childhood, and so I got I got hooked on buying an accordion or two, and started learning stuff, and found Stephen Foster music was really easy to play. And so I started thinking, what could I do with my accordion playing? And they had a big empty gallery down there we called the Flatboat Gallery. It's now got the Holiday Train display in it. I thought, I proposed that why don't I be in that empty gallery and play the music of Stephen Foster. Why Foster? Well, he came to Cincinnati in 1846. Everybody thinks he's from Kentucky, but he was actually from Pennsylvania, Lawrenceville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Hardly spent any time in Kentucky. And the big musical show down in Bardstown is wonderful, but that's not where he was born. He didn't write the song "My Old Kentucky Home" about the house down there. He was a Pittsburgh boy who came to Cincinnati in 1846 because his father said he was tired of it, sitting around the house drinking beer with his buddies, and it was time he should get a job, as Stephen Foster would say. And so his father bought him literally a one-way ticket to Cincinnati. At the age of 16, he came to Cincinnati. His brother was already here, took him under the wing. They lived in a boarding house on 4th Street, and he worked as a bookkeeper in the daytime, but at nighttime he wrote music. And so this is where he got started. I don't know how much you know about Foster, but he's the guy who wrote "Oh Susanna" and "Camptown." And now you're from Ohio, but across the river is "My Old Kentucky Home" is the state song. And way down on the Swanee River, I Dream of Jeannie with a Light. He wrote all this stuff. He started in Cincinnati. At night, I mean, he was working during the day, and at nighttime he'd write music. Eventually, he decided that he could make a living at it. He never made much money, but he did make sort of a living of it. Left Cincinnati, went back to Pittsburgh 4 years later, 3.5 years later, 1849, and ended up in New York City, where he died in 1864 at the age of 37. He wrote over 150 songs. It's a really neat story. What I would do with the accordion is I'd play music and sing while the people were walking through. And then when they stopped to listen, I'd finish a song, and then I'd talk about Foster. Foster is a part of Cincinnati history, which justifies the whole thing. And people like the music. So that's how I got into Foster. Eventually that turned into a program I'd take out to retirement homes, which is what that website's all about.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm not paid for this. It's just a volunteer thing. Of course, it's all full at the moment. That's how. So then I bought some more accordions because I got tired of buying ships. So maybe the museum will like my accordion someday, but they're not miniatures. The problem, they're full size.
Yeah. Okay, so I read your bio, obviously, and I see that you're a member of Association for Living History, Farm and Agricultural Museums, and Lloyd Library and Museum. Are you involved with any activities or exhibits at these specific museums?
The Association for Living History, which we call ALFAM, is not a museum. It's the trade association for people doing pioneer farming type stuff, living history farms, where you go and see how they planted crops in the 18th century and shod horses and stuff. And it's also the trade association for people who do first-person interpretation. So I got involved in it and went to conferences over the years. So I value my memory. They made a wonderful contribution to the profession, but it's not a museum. They don't have any. It's all entirely volunteer organization. They don't have any particular location. The Lloyd Library in Cincinnati, downtown, is the offshoot of the Lloyd Brothers Pharmaceutical Company, and in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Lloyd brothers, by the way, were from Crittenden, Kentucky, near Florence, or I guess Crittenden would be, near Florence. So they are Kentuckians. My middle initial L stands for Lloyd. I'm a great grandson of one of the 3 Lloyd brothers. And so I just have an affinity for that library and try to help them where I can, and thought up the idea of doing a first person character of John Uri Lloyd, the chemist and nationally famous, most famous of the three Lloyd brothers. I'm the descendant of the second one, but the more famous one was John Uri Lloyd. And I actually, if you look at pictures, look like the guy with particularly my ears sticking out, but he's and bald head. I look just like John Uri Lloyd. And so I do a presentation of John Uri Lloyd lecturing on eclectic medicine. What they did for drugs was botanical medicine from plants. So I lecture on the nature of botanical medicine, how I got started, how John Uri Lloyd, got started founding this company in the 1870s, and it prospered till in the 1920s. So apparently I do a fairly good job of it. I was invited, I'll tell this story real quickly. I was invited by the assistant superintendent of the Erlanger Ellesmere school system,
Yeah.
to to come as John Uri Lloyd to the John Uri Lloyd High School, named after him, in Erlanger. And I shuffle in my 1930s clothing with a hat, with a cane, and I give my lecture on. But somebody told me afterwards that somebody on the aisle turned to his wife and said, "My God, I thought he was dead." Well, he died in 1930. And the whole point was I'm coming back to life. But this guy was convinced that that was pretty good. He was convinced that I really was John Uri Lloyd, not just an imitation. Anyway, that's the same first person thing. You impersonate, you try to, but it's all done with a twinkle of the eye. The people who watch and hear know that I'm not really the person, and I know that they know. But it's a way to sugarcoat the history. It's a way to entice people to pay attention, and just have a little fun with it. You can't take it too seriously, but it is fun to do.
Yeah. It's just like a different way to get the history out there.
There's another museum in Cincinnati that you haven't mentioned, by the way, called the Fire Museum, which is a pretty cool place full of old fire equipment. And I started to do a first person character there, and found what I really want to do and what people would rather have me do is Stephen Foster comes to the Fire Museum and plays music on Saturday morning. So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long do you think the ocean liner is going to be on display at the museum?
I think it's December 30th. It's been a 4-month show. It opened on the 9th of September. But I will say that the staff over there has been absolutely wonderful. They really gotten into this, and I love working with them. And I hear from them that they're interested in using the models and things after the show's closed to have them around in corridors and education rooms to continue to tell the story in little bits and pieces to treat people. Because the ones in the glass cases are sort of works of art, of fine craftsmanship. Each is a one-off commission for me from England, shipped all the way across the Atlantic. A lot of trouble. They're beautiful single pieces. Each one was built by a builder, the ones from England, who used the blueprints for the original ships to get everything just right. So the ventilators are in the right place and the stairways are there and so on. So they deserve to be seen, and they can be exhibited as works of art, as well as works of craftsmanship, I should say, as well as telling the story. And I understand they intend to keep doing that in little dibs and dabs. And Mr. Hunter, the director, says, "Who knows? Maybe someday we'll have another full bore show." So I may not be around to see it, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to get stuff down in that video to document what we all did together.
Yeah.
You called me the curator. Marla, Tom Cree at the museum, and everybody's been helping, but has been a lead horse on officially curating. But the material that you read in the booklets and stuff was indeed drafted by me. But the creation of that exhibit with all those mannequins and so on, it's just a gorgeous thing to see.
Yeah, it is. It was really interesting. The video got me pretty intrigued about all that stuff. So, all right, last question. Is there anything else you'd like to add about the exhibits at the Kentucky Gateway Museum?
Well, the exhibit in general, you know, of course, that the miniature Kate Browning miniatures are there, and the original wing on the history of Kentucky, Maysville as gateway to the settlement of Kentucky, the Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton story. That's no mean shake either, you know. It's a try. And then there's the bourbon wing too. They got 4 wings. They got Kentucky history. They got the miniatures. They now have steam ocean liners, and they have the story of development of bourbon as a major world product in that part of Kentucky. So it's a neat place. On the exhibit that's there, the ocean liner exhibit in particular, I would observe that the Titanic story gets a lot of attention, grabs a lot of people. They think that's what ocean liners are all about.
Yeah.
There were 3 ships just like Titanic. Titanic was number 2, and the Titanic got famous because the captain did some stupid things and they ran into an iceberg and killed all those people. But
Yeah.
it's got if you go to see the movie about, is it what, Kate and Jack, or the classes of service story gets the real purpose of the show is not to titillate everybody with the Titanic story. It's to talk about ocean liners as transportation. Transportation history is really interesting because as they say about baseball, if you build them and they will come. Transportation is what's made improvements in transportation is what made possible, for good or ill, the development of the world. And so until ocean liners surpassed sailing ships, why you weren't going to get major settlement you get very slow settlement in the New World compared to what happened after liners came along. So in a sense, the ocean liner transportation of the 19th century is what made America the 20th century and Canada, because it's what allowed the settlement, mass settlement of the North American continent and other continents. I mean, Australia, people settled by sailing ship, but the things didn't take off till the steamship came along. So I regard transportation history as a very important subset of the history story. And so I'm very glad to have that ocean liner story told over there at the Maysville Museum.
I have some questions. Now, I noticed that you were wearing red and black today. When you go into the museum, you see the stacks on the ships, and they are different colors. Why is that?
They're the red and black. Here's my black jacket. And black is canard color. You're absolutely. They became trademarks for the liners. Funnels on ocean liners had a couple of purposes. One was to draft the boiler, because these were steam boiler. You put coal or oil later in the boiler, and heat the water to make the steam. The smoke needs a draft. It's a furnace, so you have a very tall funnel to increase the draft and to keep the cinders off the deck where the passengers are. They painted them different colors as trademarks. So the Titanic pictures, if you have it, the Titanic picture will have a yellow funnel with a black top. The Canard used red and black. Different other lines had stripes. So it was a marketing tool. And interesting that funnels were not always real. Funnels were a symbol of power. And so the 4th funnel on Titanic and its sister Olympic, the big model in the exhibit, Cody, that is not the big one nearby, is not Titanic. That's Olympic, the preceded Titanic. They both had yellow funnels with black tops. The 4th funnel was a fake to make it look bigger than it really was, a little more powerful than it really was. So it's a marketing device in part.
Okay.
Do they tilt? I noticed that a lot of the funnels are kind of at an angle.
Make them look streamlined. Ships remember, this is a race for speed. The reason that the ships lost to airplanes is because airplanes go faster.
Okay.
So you rake the funnels a little bit and it looks like they're speeding along.
Okay.
Take a look particularly at the small model. It's not one of these one commission models. It's a mass market model. The other kind of ship model you can get, Cody, are mass market models. You can get them, you go on eBay to now, not when I started this, you can buy models of the famous liners you can get on eBay for relatively modest cost compared to the commission ones. The little one of Normandy, the only French one in the show, and I want to just comment about that in a second. If you look at them, the funnels get shorter. The first one it's just a masterpiece. The first one is medium size. The next one is like the big Goldilocks. The second one is sort of medium, and the last one is shorter. The third one, by the way, is a fake on Normandy. It had a squash court and a dog kennel in it. It's to make it look really powerful and fast. Now, fast in ocean liner terms means 25 or 6 miles an hour, not fast like airplanes. But in the 100 years before, those ships could go across only 10 or 15 miles an hour or knots. So the race was to get you across as fast. Then when the airplanes came along, well, you didn't need them anymore. But it's that look at the aesthetics on the Normandy, and you'll see what you could do. You could just have some narrow little pipes up and probably work just as well. But it was traditional to, and for a long time, when after they dieselized all these vessels, at the tail end of the ocean liner business, they started using diesel engines, and they just needed a small exhaust, but they still put a big funnel on the top of the liner to look impressive. Look at the Disney Magic cruise model over there in the corner in the show, and the one above it, the Deutschland German cruise. Those are diesels, but they have funnels because the funnels look good. People expect funnels on ocean. You don't need them anymore.
Now, there's a difference between the Deutschland and the Disney ship compared to the other ships, right?
Well, they represent the end of the story, half succession from crossing to cruising. For a while, the old liners, as they got made obsolete by the planes, would take on cruising. They'd take the same ship and they'd run cruises instead of. You understand that the definition of an ocean liner is running a line service from point A to point B. That's why we call airliners, because they fly scheduled service. If you charter a plane, you fancy person chartering a plane, that's not an airliner. It's an airplane, but it's not running service on a scheduled basis. Ocean liners got out of the line service when the airplanes came along, but you could still take passengers on cruises. But eventually, what was needed for the cruise business would be things with stacked balconies on the side. So the old ocean liners actually went out of business. Those two models we're talking about, the Magic and the Deutschland, represent two different kinds of cruising. They use very small ones to take people to places that are really rough, Antarctica and the Arctic, Galapagos Islands in the North Atlantic, to see iceberg country, to see penguins and polar bears and stuff. They put them ashore. You go ashore or go around in rubber Zodiacs. You're talking 100, 200, 300 passengers at most. They're called expedition cruises. The other kind of cruise is to just go enjoy the Caribbean or stop at ports in the Mediterranean. In Disney's case, they take you to some place to see Alaska. What they're really on, people take families on that for is really just to meet all the princesses and Mickey Mouse and Goofy and all the Disney characters.
Yeah.
So the whole little kind of cruising, actually, Disney is one kind of cruising. Luxury cruising to see beaches and stuff is another, and then expeditions to go see penguins and polar bears. That's pretty cool. Some companies chartering icebreakers, take people to the North Pole. You can actually go to the North Pole on an icebreaker. It's probably not so much fun now because there's less ice. But none of them are to get where you just to go across to get where you want to go. The Queen Mary 2, which is built sort of like a liner, very solid across the Atlantic in the winter. But they're still running cruises because if you really want to get to England, you just get on an airplane. You don't have to take a ship anymore.
Yeah. Is that all your questions, Mrs. Nash?
Yes, I do want to say that the ships will be in the exhibit till after the first of the year. And next week, we will have a small exhibit in the windows going back to the Calvert Gallery that will contain some of Mr. and Mrs. Ford's trains. And hopefully we can make arrangements for Mr. Ford to bring his musical instruments in.
Yeah.
And play some Christmas music maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for taking time out of your day to talk to me about ocean liners and all these museums. And thank you. So.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Hey, I got something that I want to read to you. You're a senior and you're about to graduate.
Yeah.
And when you graduate, somebody useful will stand up and give you a graduation address. I bet. I mean, that's the way it's done.
Yeah.
And I have here a quotation that I really like. Keep this on my desk. I don't know whether you know the name Albert Schweitzer, but he was a famous and accomplished early 20th century concert and church organist, worldwide fame. And about age 35 or something, he decided that was wonderful. He loved Bach, and he'd keep doing it for himself, but he wanted to serve humanity. So he just left the concert business and founded a hospital for lepers in what was then called the Belgian Congo, and spent the rest of his life serving other people. He was invited to give serving the people of Africa. He was invited to give a graduation address somewhere, and this quote is from that address. I don't know what the school was, but what he said to the graduands, is that the term? He said, "I don't know what your destiny will," this is for you, Cody. "I do not know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be really happy in life are those who have sought and found how to serve." And I really believe that. And we all try to serve in our own way, and I'm sure you're going to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you're on the way already, so I send you my best wishes indeed.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Enjoyed talking to you. With you.
All right. I enjoyed talking to you too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.